Am I the butthole for not going to my boyfriend's granddad's funeral because my BF didn't wear underwear? My 23F boyfriend, 27M, of 4 years, doesn't wear underwear ever and hasn't since he was a kid. He doesn't even own any underwear. He thinks underwear is uncomfortable and restrictive. At the beginning of our relationship, I encouraged him to try different styles and cuts and sizes of underwear, but he was very adamant that he tried all the types of underwear and it just isn't for him. It hasn't really been an issue in our relationship. I was worried he'd smell bad because of it, but he's actually a pretty clean guy and washes his clothes regularly and stuff. Recently, my BF's granddad died, and my BF was obviously distraught. I was very supportive, but on the day of the funeral, he got dressed like normal, no underwear. And when I told him I wasn't going unless he wore underwear, he thought I was joking and told me that I harping on about nonsense to a grieving man. He reminded me he didn't have any underwear. We were a 2-minute walk from a Primark and I offered to grab some for him. Also, we were staying with his parents and 2 brothers, so he could have borrowed a pair off them. But I told him it was disrespectful to not wear any underwear to a funeral. He said it was fine because it is his own suit and not a rented suit and no one will be looking at his crotch, but it made me uncomfortable, so I didn't go. When he got back, he was pissed off at me and gave me the silent treatment. His parents were angry at me too and told me that it was such an inappropriate thing to think about at his granddad's funeral. They also don't believe he doesn't wear underwear and that I let down my BF when it mattered most. It's been a week and I'm back at our place while my BF is still with his parents. I'm feeling a bit guilty about all this, but am I the butthole? Am I the butthole for pointing out my sister's blue hand? I, 27M, have an older sister, 34F. She is a professional chef, and she has a lot of culinary-themed tattoos. Recently, she got her hands tattooed with measurements she uses a lot in the kitchen, like teaspoon and tablespoon and that sort of thing. She says she actually refers to them at work a lot, but I really think she just got them because it makes people ask her what they're about, and then she gets to talk about being a chef. It impresses people, and I know she enjoys the attention. Recently, we were having dinner with our parents and some family friends. The conversation turned to tattoos, and of course my sister started talking about her new ones. Since they're food-related, that steered the conversation away from tattoos and onto cooking and recipes. I kept waiting for the conversation to go back to tattoos so that I could talk about my newest one, but it wasn't happening. Finally, I found an opportunity to point out the fact that one of my sister's tattoos is such poor quality it dyed a part of the skin around it blue. That happens if the artist presses too hard and it's permanent, which means it was a cheap tattoo. Everyone else looked really awkward, but my sister laughed for some reason and said something like, "Yeah, I just have a blue hand now, oh well," and that really bothered me. I have many tattoos myself, but all of mine are really meaningful and I take a lot of care to find good artists. She obviously doesn't take them seriously and just gets them on a whim, but since hers are mostly for attention, everyone wants to talk about hers instead. I told her she shouldn't be so casual about having a bad tattoo and that it looks like it was cheap. I told her I'm glad she likes it, but it looks like she's been taking colloidal silver or something. My dad told me to let it go and my mom kept trying to change the subject, and finally my sister just said, "My tattoos are personal, it's okay if you don't like them," and ignored me for the rest of the night. My mom thinks I should apologize, and apparently the friends who were there thought I was out of line. Personally, I think I was just pointing out a fact, and I honestly want her to get better tattoos in the future for her own sake. Am I the butthole? Am I the butthole for siding with my kid against my wife? My 44M, wife, 42F, and I have 3 kids. Let's call them Josh, 15M, Megan, 14F, and Sharon, 12F. Wife has always enforced strict rules. The relevant rule here is her rule around chores. She has a list of chores for the kids to complete weekly before Saturday morning. 1. Make your bed. 2. Do your laundry. 3. Do the dishes. 4. Take out the trash. 5. Vacuum the living room. 6. Clean their rooms. 7. Clean their shared bathroom. Each week, wife will assign communal chores to each kid, and each one is responsible for their individual chores like cleaning their own room. These chores are assigned ahead of the week, and if they're not done by Saturday morning, they can kiss their weekend plans goodbye. They're not grounded, but wife revokes their privileges to hang out with friends until the chores are done. Josh has entered his rebellious phase, and he's really been pushing limits recently. This weekend, he had plans to go snowboarding with his friends. He assured his mom and me that his chores would be done this morning. Come today, Saturday, the dishes haven't been touched, his laundry remains in the hamper, and you can't walk through his room. He was fully decked out in his snow gear, and when wife asked him what he thought he was doing, he grinned and proudly announced he came up with a plan. He made an agreement with his sisters that if they did his chores today, he would do all of the communal chores the following week. I thought this showed good problem solving. Wife felt differently. She said that was not the agreement. He started to bargain and negotiate with wife, growing increasingly desperate and frustrated. Trying to be a mediator, I asked wife if it really was necessary to revoke his ski trip. He found a way to make it work so the chores get done, and we teach our kids to keep our commitments, and he made a commitment to his friends to go snowboarding with them. My son couldn't have looked happier in that moment. Wife was floored. She said he came up with this plan without running it by her. It might be a different story if he brought this solution to her last night, but he's just trying to do an end run around us. She said he could not go. End of story. This is where I might be the butthole. Unable to control his anger, he yelled, "F you," to wife. You could hear a pin drop in that moment. I was so caught off guard by this outburst. I started laughing and couldn't stop. Wife looked at me with betrayal. Then, she quietly grabbed her purse and walked out of the house. I know I shouldn't have lost my composure, but I honestly am not sure if I'm the a-hole for siding with my son. Wife's rule seemed a little unreasonable given the weight of the outcome. Am I the butthole for having my 18-year-old daughter pay for her own feminine hygiene products? My 18-year-old daughter graduated a week ago. She pays rent, splits the bills with me, and pays for her own phone bill. She's a very independent young girl. As a 56-year-old woman, I'm at an age where I don't have a menstrual cycle anymore, and so I don't buy products for that purpose anymore. And so it turned out to happen when she turned 18, so it was as if it were perfect timing to stop buying them. But even if she were under 18 and I didn't have this anymore, I would stop buying them as well. Since she's 18, I feel better about not having to go out and buy them since she's at that age where she's graduated and independent. My boyfriend somehow found out that she's been using napkins she bought at the grocery store. He said that he asked her why she bought 2 packs of napkins, and she explained that she needs them for personal use and assumed it was for that. I didn't believe him at first until I asked her about it, and she explained to me that she makes homemade tampons by rolling the napkins, and she does it to save money. I have money myself so I could go out and buy them for her, but she would need to pay me back. He asked me what I thought when I finished talking to her alone, and I said that he was right and explained that she does it to save money, and he was furious and said that I should be providing those for her. I told him that I no longer buy them because I no longer use them, because when I did I would share, but now, especially because she's 18, she can buy her own. I know she's my daughter, but the support has to stop sometime. The reason my boyfriend was furious was because she got her thing and found out there were no products left, so she had to use napkins and now she only uses those. This is her own issue to deal with, and she has no problem being self-sufficient. She's been 18 for several months. Am I the butthole for only taking my wife and sons to Disneyland? I'm 40 years old and live with my wife, 34, and our 2 sons, 7 and 5. I also have a 14-year-old daughter from a previous relationship. My daughter's mom and I were never in a relationship when she got pregnant with my daughter. My daughter has always lived with her mom. She visits us 1 to 2 times a month on the weekends. 4 years ever since my wife and I got together, we always do 2 trips a year for each of our birthdays. When our kids were born, we skipped the trips for a few years, and then as they got older, we left them with her parents for our little 4-day trips. Now that the boys are older, we took them to the Grand Canyon for my wife's birthday a few months ago. We were surprised at how good the boys are at traveling, quiet on airplanes, they don't mind walking for a few hours, just generally in a very good mood. So we thought we'd do something bigger for my birthday, a trip to Disneyland. This is especially special because I haven't been there either. I grew up poor and Disneyland was just too expensive. We flew out last week, before the Thanksgiving rush, and enjoyed 5 days in SoCal/Disney. It was a fun experience. When we got back, my daughter, who has already been to Disneyland with her mom, visited and found out about the trip from my sons. I wasn't hiding the trip from her at all, I just didn't think it was a big deal because she's already been there before. My daughter was very upset. and said it was unfair that she wasn't invited or included on the trip. I told her that it was a family trip for us and that her mom wouldn't have covered her half of the ticket anyways. Her mom is not in poverty or anything. She's just a teacher without much cash to spare. I legitimately tried to reason with my daughter. If her half of the ticket was covered, she could have joined us. I've never had my daughter yell at me, much less as much as she did that day. I don't understand the issue when 1, she's already been to Disney 2. Her mom couldn't have afforded that extra expense. 3, my sons weren't jealous of her when she went a few years ago. I just don't get the issue. I told her that we enjoyed the trip so much that we're going back in March when the weather is warmer, and that we'll let her mom know now so she can start saving for the ticket. She refused to hear me out and ended up insisting I drop her off at home. Am I the butthole? Am I the butthole for calling out my daughter for hypocritical behavior? I, 39M, have a daughter who is 20 years old. Her mother and I were never married, and we split up about 6. When my daughter was growing up, I had to travel a lot for work, and when I was home, I usually worked long hours. As a result, I wasn't as involved in her life as most parents, and our relationship has always been strained because of this. The traveling and long work weeks ended about 6 years ago when I got a new job. Shortly after that, I met my current wife, and we have 2 children together, who are 5 and 2. My daughter has never been very fond of my wife, and while our relationship has always been rocky, after I got married, it started to feel like she resented me. She's never been particularly interested in spending time together, and once my wife came into the picture, it got even more difficult to get my daughter to agree to do things together, even things as simple as having lunch/dinner together. Whenever we did manage to arrange something, she always asked if my wife was going to be there, and eventually asked me to stop inviting her, which I did. Even when it's just the 2 of us, though, when we meet or talk even over the phone, it always comes back to her complaining about her childhood and claiming that I was never around, which is false, as I did reach out and was as involved as I could be, and I've tried to explain the reason to, but didn't make a difference to her. My daughter has never met either of my younger kids. Every time I see or talk to her, I ask if she wants to come over and meet then, and she dismisses me or changes the subject every time. A few months ago, for one of my kids' birthday, she came to my house with a gift bag and just handed it to my wife without saying a word before leaving. A few days ago, I called my daughter, and we ended up getting into an argument over this. I told her that my younger kids have a sibling that they've never met and that it wasn't fair to them, but she still wouldn't listen to anything I said. Eventually, I told her that I don't want to hear her complain about me not being around much when she was younger, since she was doing the same thing to her siblings, and she told me it was different because she wasn't their mother. I told her that family was family and that she should still at least make an effort, and all she said was no before hanging up. My wife obviously agrees with me, but pretty much everyone else in our lives, friends, family members, etc., have been telling me that I was out of line and that the way I treat my daughter is wrong. I don't think I was wrong to say it, and I can't recall any instance where I've treated my daughter poorly, so I'm really just interested in what mutual people have to say. Am I the butthole? Edit to clarify the first paragraph. Her mother and I split up when she was 6 years old, not 6 years ago. Sorry for the mistype. Am I the butthole for telling my dad and stepmom I don't agree how they're raising my son? I was really wild in high school and got caught up in stuff. I tried getting everything together and even went to UCLA until I got a girl pregnant there. Basically, my dad and stepmom adopted our son after he was born before they moved to San Diego. I moved elsewhere and time flew. My son Brian is now 8 and I regret not being there, but now I do. I found out about how they're raising him and I don't agree. For example, my dad is pretty controlling. He doesn't even post pictures of him on Facebook. They signed him up for the Scouts, which is pretty outdated. The other thing I don't like is that they are always spending time together when my kids should be spending time with other kids. The worst thing is that he's in this exclusive religious school. That's funny because my dad pulled me out of my local high school to go to a religious school, and the kids were way worse, just rich. They also won't let him be a kid. When I was a kid, my room was messy and was allowed to do what I wanted. My son can't even eat there. I'm not a kid anymore. I have worldly experience. I have a say and it's a value. So I told them both and they got furious at me. I asked who is being childish now. I'm offering a dissenting opinion and they can't handle it. I don't like being sidelined and having my opinions ignored when I have something to offer. The reality is that I care. Edit. I don't owe my dad anything. He should actually thank me for creating that kid. My son is his golden child, and basically my son's existence is my dad's life. Also, I was 21 when that girl got pregnant. I was pretty much a kid myself. And no, I didn't finish UCLA. I work as a heavy machine mechanic and do well. Am I the butthole for dropping my daughter from my wife and I's medical insurance? My daughter is 23 and just got a call from her gynecologist. She apparently had previously had an abnormal pap smear that she never informed us about. However, then she got a biopsy which came back abnormal, and she probably needs LEEPs. I am very disappointed because I know she got HPV from a boyfriend I disapproved of because he was obviously someone who didn't look like he'd be loyal. And now she's stuck with the consequences, and my wife and I feel like if we pay for her treatment, it would be condoning it. We feel that she has no right to be sobbing and hyperventilating, while also going on the "it's not my fault" mantra, and we don't want to enable her further. Now we are making steps towards ensuring that we will never have to pay for anything she needs medically, and for that matter materially anymore. Her credit cards have been cut off, but the dropping from insurance process hasn't progressed that far. What makes us even angrier is the fact that she had just lost her entry-level job due to her company closing down, and she chooses to continue to see unreliable boyfriends. We raised her better. I built a great family business from nothing, and I shudder at what people would think if they knew my daughter got an STD from sleeping around at such a young age. Am I the butthole?